Hello, and welcome back to Nocturne Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that drift through the Nocturne Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. Stop. I really needed to use the bathroom. For what felt like the longest 50 minutes of my life, I had been staring at the clock on the classroom wall, trying to force the hands to move faster. I kept shifting from one side of my chair to the other, squeezing my legs together and pressing one hand against my stomach. A few people had already started giving me strange looks. The clock showed 2:52 p.m. Only 8 minutes remained until the final bell. 8 minutes was not that long, I told myself. It was only 2 groups of 4 minutes. 4 groups of 2 minutes. 8 groups of 60 seconds. I could survive that. At first, the pain had felt like a normal stomachache. It had started after lunch as a dull pressure below my ribs. I had swallowed 2 Tylenol tablets with warm soda from the vending machine and assumed the pain would disappear. Instead, it became worse. Something inside my stomach seemed to twist and tighten. Every few seconds, another cramp pulled through my lower body so hard that I had to lean onto my left side to find even a little relief. I must have moved too many times because Roman Hemlock, the boy sitting beside me, finally looked over. Roman had been half asleep for most of class. His dark blonde curls hung over his half-closed eyes, and his chin rested against his fist. There was a small line between his eyebrows and a slight curl in his lip. I could not tell whether his expression meant, "Are you okay?" or, "Can you please stop moving?" Knowing Roman, it was probably the second one. It was not as if he was making the situation easier. For half the lesson, he had been tapping his foot against the floor. Then, he started knocking the leg of his chair against his desk. A few minutes later, his fingers joined in. Tap, tap, tap. Without the stomach pain, I might have ignored it. With the pain, every sound felt like a drill being pushed into my skull. I already felt sick. The sad chicken nuggets I had forced myself to eat during lunch were rising into the back of my throat. The classroom was far too hot. The summer air was thick and unmoving. Sweat glued my hair to the back of my neck, and my shirt stuck to my skin. When I tilted my head back, the ceiling lights seemed painfully bright. Every sound around me became impossible to ignore. Imogen Hart sat behind me, chewing gum with her mouth open. Kaz Samuels was writing notes, as if his life depended on it. I could hear every movement of his pencil, every pause, and every time he looked up at the presentation before continuing. When I leaned forward, I could even smell what Isabella Trinity had eaten for lunch. I pulled my stomach in and took slow breaths through my nose. I had never experienced cramps this bad before, but I thought I understood what was happening. I was 16 years old and had still not started my period. After several uncomfortable visits to the doctor, and years of watching my friends complain about something I had never experienced, it appeared that my body had finally decided to catch up. This was it. The horrible pain tearing through my stomach was supposed to be me entering womanhood. Another wave of nausea hit me. My mouth filled with saliva. I raised my hand. "Mr. Brighton." Before the teacher could notice me, Roman lifted his own arm. "Can I use the bathroom?" I almost turned and hit him. Mr. Brighton always gave the same answer, which was why I had spent most of the class sitting with my legs crossed. Our physics teacher stood near the wall, staring at the PowerPoint presentation projected across the front of the room. The same slide had been displayed for at least 5 minutes, but he had not said a word. Mr. Brighton was around my father's age, perhaps in his early 50s. His hair was turning gray, and he wore the same dark suit almost every day. There was even a stain on his collar that never seemed to disappear. His lessons were usually about as exciting as watching paint dry. Under normal circumstances, the low, empty sound of his voice could make me fall asleep within minutes. The pain in my stomach was the only thing keeping me awake. "Mr. Brighton," Roman repeated more loudly. "Can I use the bathroom? Please?" The teacher finally straightened and folded his arms. "Mr. Hemlock, you know the rules. Why did you not go before class?" Roman lifted his head from his hand. "Because I didn't need to go an hour ago." "You will no longer need to use the bathroom, Mr. Hemlock." Roman made a small snorting sound. "What?" The quiet conversation around the room faded into background noise. I looked at the clock again. 2:52 p.m. cold moved down my spine. It had been 2:52 the last time I checked. At least 5 minutes had passed since then. I watched the clock carefully. I counted 60 seconds under my breath. The minute hand did not move. The second hand was frozen halfway between the 3 and the 4. At first, I thought the clock was broken. Then I noticed the silence. The breeze that had been drifting through the open window was gone. The birds outside had stopped singing. The cheerleaders practicing on the field below had gone quiet. Everything outside the room had stopped. I tried to ignore the panic growing inside me and pulled my phone from beneath my desk. A message from my mother glowed on the screen. When I tried to open it, nothing happened. I swiped again, but the screen did not react. The time in the corner read 2:52 p.m. My hands became wet with sweat as I stared at the numbers. I wanted them to change. I needed them to change. Nothing happened. "What the hell are you talking about?" Roman's voice pulled my attention back toward the front. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I barely heard it. Something was wrong outside the window. Our classroom was on the top floor, giving us a perfect view of the sports fields. The cheer squad normally practiced there after lunch. I had watched them earlier, mostly because one of the flyers had thrown herself into a flip that looked as though it might break her neck. Now the cheerleaders were gone from sight. Then I saw Jessie Carson on the running track. She was frozen in the middle of a sprint. Her strawberry blonde curls hung around her head as if they were floating in water. Her left foot was lifted above the track, and her right leg was stretched behind her. Even the cloud of dirt she had kicked up was hanging motionless in the air. I slowly looked around the classroom. Roman was still arguing with Mr. Brighton. For one terrifying second, he appeared frozen too. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was open in the shape of a shout. Then he blinked. "What do you mean I won't need the bathroom anymore?" he demanded. "Mr. Hemlock, lower your voice." "Why?" "You can't decide when I need to use the bathroom." The rest of the class was still moving. Imogen continued chewing her gum. Kaz continued writing. Roman continued tapping one foot. But those were the only sounds I could hear. The classroom had begun to change. Students were looking at their phones, checking the wall clock, and staring through the windows. Roman finally noticed. His gaze moved slowly toward the clock. The color drained from his face. All 12 of us reached the same conclusion. It was still 2:52 p.m. Time had stopped, but somehow we had not. "Is the clock broken?" Roman asked. Kaz turned in his chair and rolled his eyes. "Check your phone, idiot. I broke my phone." Imogen threw her iPhone toward him. It nearly struck him in the face. "Everything is frozen," she said. Her voice trembled. "It isn't just the clock." Roman caught the phone and stared at it. For once, he had nothing to say. "Well done, Imogen," Miss Brighton said. "That is correct." He walked to his desk, tore a sheet of paper from a workbook, and crossed to the classroom door. Using glue, he fixed the paper over the small glass window. Several people began shouting. Others started crying. Mr. Brighton calmly removed a key from his pocket and locked the door. Under any other circumstances, I might have been shocked that our teacher had decided to lock an entire class inside a room. However, rumors about Mr. Brighton had been spreading for months. According to Becca Jason, his wife had divorced him and taken their children. Some students said he had been sleeping at the school. Others claimed he had been fired from his previous job for threatening a student. I sank lower in my chair. If the rumors were true, he had nothing left to lose. Mr. Brighton returned to the front of his desk and smiled patiently at us. "From this moment forward, you will remain inside this classroom," he said. "As you have noticed, time has stopped at 2 minutes past 2. The 13 of us are currently trapped inside the 21st second of that minute. We will remain here for the foreseeable future." Nobody knew how to answer. We wanted to accuse him of lying. We wanted to believe it was a trick, a prank, or some strange technical failure. But another minute passed. Then another. Kaz threw his phone onto the floor. Imogen began to cry. The pencil Roman had been chewing broke between his teeth. We could not deny what was happening because the proof surrounded us. There was no traffic outside the school gates, no birds, no planes overhead, no voices in the hallways. The entire world had stopped. Only our classroom remained awake. It felt like a nightmare. My physics class was filled with some of the most boring and irritating people in the school. Somehow, the entire world had been reduced to the 12 of us and our teacher. We were terrified, but reality had stopped making sense. There was no obvious way to fight what was happening. We had no choice, except to listen. "Before you panic, Mr. Brighton continued, you should understand that the 12 of you have also stopped." He placed one hand over his heart. I did not understand what he meant until I noticed that the cramps in my stomach were gone. "Place a hand over your heart," he instructed. "You mean in some kind of cult ritual?" Imogen whispered. Obviously, Roman muttered as he started to rise. He hesitated when Mr. Brighton looked at him, then slowly sat back down. "This crazy man wants to play games with us. I am only asking you to check your heartbeat, Mr. Brighton said. I pressed my palm against my chest. There was nothing. No beat. No movement. My stomach tightened with fear. Roman pushed 2 fingers against his neck. Then he checked his wrist. Finally, he placed a hand over his chest. His expression changed. "Nothing. The 12 of you are in a state of stasis, Mr. Brighton explained. You are not alive, but you are not dead. Your normal bodily functions are paused. You have no heartbeat or pulse. You will not need food, water, sleep, or the bathroom." He looked directly at Roman. Roman appeared ready to faint. "Your minds, however, continue working normally." "But why?" Imogen demanded. Mr. Brighton's smile faded. "I would rather not answer that." Because you're lonely, Roman said. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the teacher. Your wife left you. Your children left you. Now you're trying to control a room full of teenagers because nobody else wants to be around you. That's pathetic. Mister, Brighton's expression darkened. Something sour rose into my throat. Insulting the man who had apparently stopped time seemed like the worst possible decision. We were trapped inside a single second with someone who could bend reality. We had no idea what else he could do. I expected Mr. Brighton to attack Roman. Instead, he leaned against his desk. Yes, he said. I suppose you could say I am lonely. Why us? Kaz asked. Because you are children. Mr. Brighton pushed away from the desk and walked slowly toward Roman. The rest of us leaned back as he passed. I tried to move my desk with me, but it was fixed to the floor. His shoes clicked against the wood. You are correct, Mr. Brighton said quietly. My wife and children left me. I no longer have anyone to control. I have no one to shape, punish, or use for my own benefit. He stopped beside Roman's desk and leaned down until their faces were only inches apart. Congratulations, Mr. Hemlock. You have earned attention. Roman did not move at first, but fear appeared in his eyes. He was loud and rude, but he was not brave when a situation became serious. What? He asked. You trap us in some time prison and still want to act like a teacher? Stand up. What if I don't? Mr. Brighton's expression remained calm. You have already seen that I can trap you inside a single second. What else do you think I can do? Roman slowly stood and kicked his chair behind him. What are you going to do to me, old man? Stand straight and close your mouth. To my surprise, Roman obeyed. His back straightened, his lips closed. Do not resist, Mr. Brighton said. Follow me. Roman did exactly as he was told. The angry light disappeared from his eyes. His jaw became loose, and his gaze fixed on empty space. That was the moment when the rest of us understood that escape might not be possible. I will use Mr. Hemlock as an example, Mr. Brighton said to the class. If you break my rules or speak to me disrespectfully, you will be given detention. He placed both hands on Roman's shoulders and guided him toward the supply closet. Roman walked like a machine. He was slightly unsteady, and his eyes moved as if he were following something none of us could see. The length of detention will depend on the seriousness of the rule you break. Mr. Brighton opened the closet door, pushed Roman inside, and followed him. The door closed. For several seconds, nobody moved. Kaz eventually stood and began walking toward the closet. This man is completely insane, he whispered. He turned toward us. Whatever he is doing to Roman, he will probably do to the rest of us. He stopped time, I said. My voice was barely louder than a breath. He could do anything. But how? Kaz asked. He says he is lonely, but why punish us? What did we do? Check his desk for a weapon, Imogen whispered urgently. Kaz hurried toward the teacher's desk. He pushed papers aside and lifted old coffee cups and textbooks. There's nothing, he said. He sat in the teacher's chair and opened the drawers. He has a lot of Pokemon cards, Kaz added. No weapon. He picked up a wooden ruler and held it like a knife. We could put this through his eye. Try the laptop, Imogen said. Kaz struck several keys. It's locked. Look harder, Ren Clark whispered, throwing a pencil at him. I am looking. After searching for another minute, Kaz found a single sheet of paper. He lifted it. It contained a list of our names. Several were highlighted. Kaz's confidence disappeared. His hands began shaking. Mr. Brighton has a hit list, he whispered. He's planning to kill us. How do you know? I asked. Kaz pointed toward the first name, which had been marked in red. Roman Hemlock. There were 6 red names. Mine was one of them. Krista Adams. At that exact moment, a cry came from inside the supply closet. All of us froze. Kaz jumped and nearly fell over the desk. He rushed to put everything back where he had found it. The list disappeared beneath a pile of test papers. He hurried to his seat and dropped into it. Brighton has a hit list, he sang nervously. And we're all on it. Silence followed. We waited for Roman to cry out again. He did not. Some students started praying. Others tried to call their parents with phones that no longer worked. I remained in my chair, trying to understand how much of my body had truly stopped. I could not feel my heart. I did not need to breathe, although my mind still believed I was suffocating. Being kidnapped was terrifying. Being locked inside 1 second that would never end was something worse. It was a kind of hell that had no beginning or ending. I pressed my hand over my chest again. Then I breathed into my cupped palms. There was no warmth. Realizing that I had no heartbeat and no real breath filled me with a fear I did not know was possible. I felt empty, as if everything human inside me had been removed. First came denial, then acceptance. Finally came regret. I regretted not hugging my mother before leaving for school. I regretted shouting at my parents when they refused to drive me across the country for a music festival. Most of all, I regretted walking into Mr. Brighton's 4th period physics class. The supply closet door opened. Mr. Brighton stepped out and locked Roman inside. I forced myself not to react. I no longer knew how much time had passed. Time itself was frozen, so minutes, hours, and days had lost their meaning. My body did not become hungry, stiff, tired, or thirsty. Outside the window, the sky remained the same clear blue. Every cloud stayed in the same position. Jesse Carson was still frozen on the track. What is wrong with all of you? Mr. Brighton asked with a laugh. Why don't you smile? He returned to his desk. Without thinking, I sat up straight and forced my lips into a wide smile. Around me, everyone did the same. Imogen wore an exaggerated grin. Kaz smiled through clenched teeth. Mr. Hemlock has earned 2 weeks in the supply closet, Mr. Brighton said casually. Would anyone like to join him, or are you prepared to follow the rules? Nobody answered. Mr. Brighton looked at Kaz. Mr. Samuels, are you all right? Kaz's smile weakened. Yeah, he said. I'm fine. The teacher's eyes narrowed. He walked to his desk and glanced at the papers. I knew immediately that he had noticed something. He looked at Kaz, then at the list. He knew Kaz had searched the desk. Mr. Brighton could have punished him immediately, but he appeared to enjoy making us afraid. He slowly folded the list and placed it inside his pocket. You are sweating, Mr. Samuels, he said. Are you feeling unwell? Kaz hesitated. He was one of the smartest people in the room, and I could almost see him considering every possible answer. If he admitted he was nervous, Mr. Brighton might ask why. If he lied, lying might count as breaking a rule. If he explained that he had left his seat, he would reveal that he had searched the desk. There was no safe answer. Kaz finally remained silent and forced his smile to become wider. Mr. Brighton smiled back. Good. Kaz lowered his head onto his arms. Do not worry about the sweating, the teacher said to the rest of us. It should eventually stop, just as hunger and thirst have stopped. Mr. Brighton could control everything around him. Time, our bodies, our minds. Slowly, he began changing us into something that belonged to him. Days passed inside that single second. At least they felt like days. The experience was confusing, like being trapped in a dream after taking too much medicine. When I stood, I felt as if I were floating. When I sat, hours disappeared without warning. At first, I tried to keep track. I marked each day on a piece of paper. I lost count somewhere around the 13th or 14th mark. Nothing outside changed. The permanent stillness slowly damaged our minds. After keeping us at our desks for what felt like weeks, Mr. Brighton allowed us to move around the classroom as long as we stayed away from the door. I spent days lying on the floor and counting ceiling tiles. Sometimes Imogen lay beside me. We could not sleep, but we pretended. We closed our eyes and imagined the outside world moving again. My body never became hungry, but my mind occasionally remembered food. After a while, eating itself began to seem strange. Putting something into your mouth, chewing it, and swallowing it to stay alive sounded almost unbelievable. The only thing that changed was our mental condition. Weekdays, weekends, mornings, and nights had no meaning. We invented new days with names like Saturday Tuesday and Wednesday Friday. On one particular Saturday Tuesday, I was hanging upside down from the edge of my desk while Kaz and Imogen drew pictures on the whiteboard. Kaz had once created a plan to escape. The 12 of us had agreed that we needed a weapon. We believed we might be able to distract Mr. Brighton, unlock his laptop, or attack him. That had been weeks earlier, perhaps months. The plan had gone nowhere. Kaz, the person we trusted to think clearly, was slowly falling under Mr. Brighton's influence. For 3 days, he and the teacher had been holding a competition to see who could draw the strangest picture. Mr. Brighton sat at his desk, marking the same papers again and again. Imogen was drawing something she claimed was a skateboard when the supply closet door opened. Roman stepped out. To my surprise, he did not look injured or terrified. He raised one hand. Hey, his appearance immediately silenced the class. Kaz and Imogen stopped arguing. I sat up. Most of us had assumed Roman was dead. Mr. Brighton glanced at him. Mr. Hemlock will now rejoin the class, he said. Please make him comfortable. I am sure he is pleased to speak with you again. Roman did not return to his desk. Instead, he walked to the whiteboard, took the marker from Kaz, and drew a surprisingly detailed penis. I did not know what confused me more. Roman was a much better artist than I had expected, and he seemed perfectly normal after spending 2 weeks alone in a dark supply closet. I jumped down and joined the others. Kaz was already questioning him. What did he do to you? Roman shrugged. Nothing. Then why did you scream? Imogen asked. Roman tilted his head. Scream? You cried out after he put you inside, Kaz said. Something changed in Roman's eyes. Oh, he said. That, Kaz placed both hands on his shoulders. What happened? Imogen pushed Kaz aside. You don't have to tell us if it was horrible, she said. If he hurt you or did something you don't want to discuss. Roman laughed. All of us stared at him. Are you serious? Kaz did not answer. Roman pulled the 4 of us into a tight group. When Mr. Brighton looked up, Roman smiled at him before lowering his voice. You really think our 50-year-old physics teacher was doing something disgusting to me inside the closet? Why did you scream? Kaz demanded. Did he hit you? I don't think so. You don't think so? Why are you protecting him? Imogen asked. poking Roman's forehead. "Did he do something to your brain?" Roman pushed her hand away. "Stop touching me. I'm fine." He stepped back as if we were the strange ones. "I won't be fine if you keep treating me like I'm an idiot." Kaz sighed. "Answer one question." "Go ahead." "When you first entered the closet, you made a clear sound of fear." Roman groaned. "Of course I shouted. I had been pushed into a dark closet by a man who stopped time." "What did you expect me to do?" Kaz did not look convinced. Neither did Imogen. Roman rested his head against the wall. "There is nothing to tell," he said. "Brighton didn't do anything. I was scared. Sorry for acting like a normal person. Next time, I'll attack him and throw him onto the floor." We did not believe him. I do not think Roman believed himself. Something important had changed in him. He was no longer angry or argumentative. It was as if someone had removed part of his personality. Roman's behavior became an example for the rest of us. Once he began following instructions and walking around with a distant smile, the others slowly did the same. Eventually, I stopped thinking about escape. Days, weeks, and months passed like seconds. I did not realize how far my mind had fallen apart until one random Saturday Wednesday. The class was gathered on the floor around a Monopoly board. The game had continued for almost a week. I was laughing so hard that I fell backward. I could not remember what was funny. Imogen might have told a bad joke. "Hand it over," Roman said. He had become the king of Monopoly and was demanding my final $250. I studied his smile, searching for evidence that he was under Mr. Brighton's control. There was none. Roman appeared genuinely happy. To my horror, so did I. I was not trapped in a dream. I was not unconscious. I knew exactly where I was. Was this Stockholm Syndrome? Was I truly enjoying myself? My thoughts felt soft and distant, as if my head were filled with cotton. Imogen and Kaz sat close together, completely focused on the game. Their hair, clothes, and faces had not changed because their bodies were still frozen in time. Their personalities had changed completely. Imogen had once been an angry cheerleader. Kaz had been an exhausted student who worked so hard that he sometimes gave himself nosebleeds. Now they looked relaxed. They laughed and shared jokes. Kaz caught me staring. "You okay, Krista?" My smile felt real. "I'm fine. It's your turn." I picked up the dice and rolled. 2 sixes. "I can already see her landing on one of my hotels," Roman said. "As the obvious winner, I have an offer." I moved my piece and landed on Park Place. "I'll give you $500 for New York Avenue," Roman said. "That's my only property." "Don't do it," Imogen warned me. "If you give it to him, he only needs one more." 1,000, Roman said, waving the fake money. "Final offer." I reached for it. He pulled it away. "New York Avenue," he said, grinning, "and your pride." I handed him the property. Kaz rolled the dice and picked up a card. "Go directly to jail." Roman laughed. "That's what you get for stealing from the bank." "You were stealing too," Kaz argued. "We had a plan." The thought appeared suddenly. We had planned to escape. Imogen and I were supposed to get into Mr. Brighton's laptop. It was not a perfect idea, but at least it had been an idea. What had happened to us? Why were we playing games? Months earlier, Kaz had whispered his theory to us. "Mr. Brighton is the thing keeping us here," he had explained. "If we kill him, I'm almost certain everything will return to normal." "What if he dies and we stay trapped?" Imogen had asked. I said almost certain. There is a small chance his power will continue without him, but it is more likely that the effect will end when he dies. And where did you learn that? Wren had asked. You'll feel better if I don't answer. So we need a weapon, Wren said. And don't tell Roman, Kaz warned us. I don't care what he claims. Something happened to his mind. If we tell him, he might tell Brighton. Now, I was no longer certain that Roman wanted to escape. I was no longer certain that any of us did. Mr. Brighton had joined the Monopoly game. He sat nearby, marking papers and taking his turn whenever someone reminded him. His presence felt natural. It felt as though he belonged with us. Part of me wanted to question that feeling, but another part no longer cared. We were trapped in a dead second. We had no heartbeats, no hunger, no thirst, and no connection to the outside world. I had stopped thinking about my old life. I could barely remember my mother's face. I watched Imogen throw a chance card at Roman. He threw one back and threatened to knock over the board. I made my decision. I wanted to stay. Then I noticed Wren. He had been sitting beside me, but he was slowly moving away from the group. At first, I did not understand what he was doing. Then I saw the box cutter hidden inside his fist. At some point, we had found it. We had chosen it as our weapon. The rest of us had lost the desire to use it. Wren had not. I did not see the exact moment he attacked. 1 second, mister. Brighton was sitting near the board. The next, Wren drove the blade into the side of his neck. Blood poured from the wound. Mr. Brighton fell. The classroom shook. It was not the building itself. Time seemed to tremble around us. I looked at the clock. The second hand moved. Slowly, the minute changed. 2:53 p.m. warm liquid spread beneath my knees. Blood. Real blood. It was flowing instead of hanging motionless in the air. Roman looked at me. He blinked several times and dropped the dice. His expression changed as if he had just awakened from a long sleep. 2:53 p.m. We were free. The breeze rushed through the window and touched my face. My heart slammed against my ribs. Sweat covered my forehead. The cramps returned so violently that I folded forward. Outside, Jessie Carson screamed. More screams came from the hallway. They were getting closer. At first, none of us understood. We had spent months trapped inside a single second. Freedom should have meant safety. Roman turned toward the door. The paper Mr. Brighton had glued over the glass window fell away. Roman stared through it. His face became pale. His lips opened in a silent cry. I followed his gaze. A shadow stood on the other side. A person who had been frozen at 2:52 p.m. A person holding a gun. 2:53 p.m. Damn it, Roman whispered. He stumbled to his feet. Get down. I dropped to my knees. The classroom exploded. Glass shattered. Wood split. Gunshots tore through the room. 2:54 p.m. I crawled beneath a desk. Blood covered the floor. It belonged to my friend. People who had laughed beside me only seconds earlier were screaming, falling, and becoming silent. 2:55 p.m. I found Mr. Brighton's hand. I held it as tightly as I could. Roman crawled beside me and pressed trembling fingers against the teacher's neck. There was no pulse. Another gunshot struck close enough to shake my skull. Roman's body suddenly became heavy. He fell beside me. I wrapped both arms around Mr. Brighton. Mr. Brighton, I whispered. Say stop. Imogen's screaming ended. Footsteps entered the classroom. I shook my teacher's cold body. Mr. Brighton, please, the footsteps moved closer. take us back. A shadow fell across me. Cold metal pressed against my neck. Stop. Story 2. I have never been good with money. That is probably the biggest understatement I have ever made. I like to tell myself it is not entirely my fault. I belong to that group of people who did everything society told us to do and still somehow ended up worse off than the people who gave us the advice. Go to school, get good grades, attend college, earn a degree, find a stable job, work hard, save money, buy a home. It all sounded simple when older people explained it. They forgot to mention that college would leave me with $69,075 in student debt. They also forgot to mention that this kind of debt follows you almost everywhere. Even bankruptcy does not always make it disappear. You can lose your job, your apartment, your car, and your last clean pair of socks. But that student loan company will still find you. Call us whatever you want. Millennials, Gen Z, Zillennials, Zoomers, Gloomers, the lost generation. It does not really matter. The point is that many of us did what we were told and were rewarded with a giant sandwich made of disappointment, debt, and rising rent. Apparently, I should have invested in gold, silver, oil, property, technology companies, and the stock market. I should have taken 10% of my monthly income and invested it in the S&P 500 back when prices were low. The only problem was that I was about 4 years old at the time. God, in his wisdom, chose to make me too young to benefit from the dot-com boom and just old enough to watch artificial intelligence slowly make my job unnecessary. Other than that, everything was going wonderfully. These were the thoughts going through my head while I searched for an apartment. Apartment hunting had become less about finding a place I liked and more about finding a building willing to accept me despite my credit score. Every application demanded another credit check, another fee, another bank statement, and another piece of evidence proving I could afford rent that was clearly too high for me. Eventually, after several rejected applications, 2 uncomfortable phone calls to my parents, and some creative rearranging of numbers, I found a place. The building manager was a thin, serious woman who looked like she had never smiled in her life. She demanded the deposit in cash. I handed her a sweaty $100 bill while coins, lint, and an old receipt fell from my pocket onto her desk. She watched it happen without blinking. The apartment building itself was exactly what I could afford. The lobby and hallways were covered in green carpet that looked like it had once been bright, but had faded into the color of old soup. Years of cigarette burns, spilled drinks, dirty shoes, and what smelled strongly like human urine had become part of the fabric. Yellow lamps hung from the ceiling, filling the halls with sickly light. I believe the correct architectural term for the building was shithole, though I never checked. Naturally, the elevator was out of service. My apartment was on the 7th floor. I carried all my belongings upstairs in 3 trips, sweating through my shirt before I reached the 4th floor on the first climb. By the time I was done, my back felt as though someone had been striking it with a metal pipe. There were 3 other people living in the apartment. That was not too bad, considering the rent. One of the roommates even seemed like he might not be a complete sociopath, which felt like an unexpected bonus. My bedroom was small enough that I could almost touch both walls at the same time. I dropped my boxes onto the floor and pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was the advertisement I had torn from a bulletin board less than 2 weeks earlier. I unfolded it and read it again. Cheap room, shared apartment, near public transport. Furnished, at least, that was what I thought it said. The old printer had sprayed a dark spot over one of the words. Looking closely, I realized the truth. It did not say furnished. It said unfurnished. I stood in the empty room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and loose clothes, and cursed myself. There was no bed, no chair, no desk, nothing. The only thing covering the floor was my belongings and several small piles of fresh rat poison along the walls. The bitter chemical smell drifted into my nose. For my first night, I slept on a folded jacket. The following morning, my back hurt so badly that I had to roll sideways before standing up. That was how I ended up at Joe's Mattress Acropolis on the corner of 35th and Fitz. The automatic doors slid open with a quiet mechanical sound, almost as if they were laughing at me for entering. Inside were mattresses, a shocking number of mattresses. There were beds on platforms, beds stacked against walls, beds arranged beneath signs promising comfort, health, romance, and better sleep. Large yellow stickers covered everything, each one cut into an excited zigzag shape and displaying a supposedly low price. A man came out from the back of the store. I assumed he was Joe, though he wore no name tag and did not look Greek. He had maroon trousers, a short-sleeved, button-up shirt, and a wide belt buried beneath his stomach. His shirt was tucked in tightly, but his gut pushed over the belt anyway. On his head sat a dark toupee that was not fooling anyone. "Anything I can help you with?" he asked. His smile was the perfect shape of a salesman's smile, wide, smooth, and completely empty. For the first time, I noticed that there were no other customers. The entire store was silent, beneath flickering white lights. Joe stood waiting for my answer. The longer I remained quiet, the larger his grin appeared to become. "Yeah," I said. "I need a mattress." It was a stupid answer. Obviously, I needed a mattress. The store did not sell bicycles. Joe clapped his hands together. "Indeed, I can help you with that, young man." He pointed a finger at me like a pistol and pretended to fire. "Tell me, what kind of sleeper are you? Just a normal one, I guess. Do you sleep on your side? No, on your stomach? Your back? Topsy-turvy? Hooded wombat, perhaps?" I stared at him. "What was that last one?" He ignored the question. "Back sleeper? I guess. Aha." He fired another finger gun. "I knew you had the look of a back sleeper. I wondered what that look was." He leaned closer. "Any health problems? Special requirements? Back pain? Scoliosis? Uneven legs? Cursed spine?" "I really just need a mattress." I looked at the prices again. The cheapest mattress I could see was $2.99. A wave of anxiety slowly opened inside my chest. I had nowhere near that much money. My eyes returned to Joe. I was embarrassed even before I spoke. "Do you have any used mattresses?" His smile disappeared. "We prefer the term pre-owned." His voice had suddenly become serious enough to make me uncomfortable. Then the smile returned. "Of course we do. Follow me." He led me past a pair of fake white pillars that looked as though they had been carved from stone. They were made of foam. One had a crack where someone had bumped into it. Near the back of the store stood a tall pile of old mattresses balanced on top of one another. The stack leaned at an angle like a giant game of Jenga waiting to collapse. The mattresses were bare, yellow, and stained. A cheap sandalwood air freshener filled the air. Beneath it was another smell. Something sweet, something rotten, something I could not identify. Joe pushed his glasses up with one finger. "A single mattress begins at $99. The fluorescent light above us flickered. For one instant, the room went dark. In that moment, I felt something. It was not quite fear, it was more like the beginning of fear, a warning too quiet to fully hear, a cold feeling moving slowly up my spine. The light came back. "Sorry about that," Joe said with a chuckle. "I've been meaning to replace that tube." I shoved my hands into my pockets. "Look, man, I have maybe $60. Can you help me or not?" Joe rubbed his chin. He studied me for several seconds. "I might have exactly what you need." He turned and walked deeper into the store. I followed him. The uneasy feeling grew stronger with every step. We moved through a narrow hallway with a low ceiling. Several lights were burned out. The air became colder, and the smell beneath the sandalwood grew more noticeable. Finally, Joe opened a door and led me into a stockroom. Dust floated in a thin beam of light, coming through a dirty window. The room looked empty. "If you can carry it away," Joe said, "you can have it." His cheerful salesman voice was gone. The change was so sudden that I looked directly at him to make sure he was the same person. "The room is empty," I said. My words came out harsher than I intended. I thought he was making fun of me. It was already humiliating enough to admit that I could not afford the cheapest used mattress. I did not need this strange man turning my situation into a joke. Joe cleared his throat. He pointed weakly toward the corner. At first, I still saw nothing. Then my eyes adjusted. A queen-sized mattress rested against the far wall. It was covered in dust and barely visible in the poor light. I stepped closer. It did not look good, but it was better than sleeping on the floor. I could not see any obvious waste stains or suspicious white marks. I would not have allowed a black light within 100 feet of it, but for free I was not going to complain. "I can just take it?" I asked. "Yes." "No paperwork?" "No. Why?" Joe's eyes moved toward the mattress. For a moment he looked frightened. Then his usual smile returned. "Old stock." I called my friend Julio. He arrived in his 2004 Toyota Hilux and helped me load the mattress into the back. We wedged it between a weed trimmer and half a bag of cement, then tied it down with 2 ropes that looked almost strong enough. I thanked Joe. He stood outside the store and watched us leave. As Julio drove, I looked back. For 1 second, I saw the expression on Joe's face. There was no smile, no sales performance, no fake confidence, only something I could not understand. Relief, perhaps, or guilt. I remembered the dread I had felt while walking deeper into the store. It had grown stronger near the mattress. Probably nothing, I told myself. Joe was strange. The store was old. The lights were bad. That was all. Julio stopped at a bar on the way back to my apartment. After my first mouthful of Keystone Light, I stopped thinking about Joe. By the 3rd drink, I was celebrating the $60 I had saved by spending most of it on beer. As I already said, I have never been good with money. Later that night, Julio and I dragged the mattress up 7 flights of stairs. In my drunken condition, it felt like 17. We bumped it against every wall and nearly dropped it over the railing twice. When we finally reached my room, we threw it onto the floor with a heavy thud. A cloud of dust rose from the mattress. Both of us began coughing. I spent 10 minutes slapping and beating the surface, trying to remove as much dirt as possible. Eventually, I gave up, covered it with a sheet, and fell onto it. The radiator made a soft hissing sound. My head spun from the alcohol. Within minutes, I began to drift toward sleep. That was when I realized something was wrong. The first thing I saw was the sky. It was purple, but not any shade of purple I had seen before. The color moved across it in waves, bands of violet, pink, blue, and colors I could not name rolled through the heavens. The entire sky seemed to expand and shrink slowly. It was breathing. I knew it was alive. I also knew it was aware of me. Then, a thought entered my mind. It did not feel like my own thought. Don't look behind you. The sky rippled. Circular bands of light appeared overhead. They folded inward toward a point at the center of the sky. Each ring moved inside the next, narrowing and turning. The breathing slowed. I tried to calm myself. I had drunk too much. This was a dream. Dreams could not hurt me. I looked down. I stood in an endless field filled with pale willow trees. Their bark was almost white. Their long, bare branches twisted and moved even though there was no wind. At first, I thought I heard birds. Then I realized the sound was laughter. It was faint and distant. The noise did not sound human. It moved through several pitches at once, from deep growls to high squeals. It became louder with every breath the sky took. Then I understood. The laughter belonged to the sky. It pulsed in time with the moving colors. The rings folded inward. Again, again. It was beautiful. That was the most frightening part. The sound began to relax me. My fear faded. I started swaying with the willow trees. Their branches moved slowly from side to side, and my body followed them. I felt as though I had finally discovered the rhythm of everything. The trees belonged to the sky. The grass belonged to the sky. I belonged to the sky. A root curled around my ankle. I did not care. A branch touched my hand. It felt gentle, like someone asking me to dance. I held it. The tree pulled me closer. The laughter grew louder, and I wanted to join it. I smiled. Another willow branch rested against my shoulder. My body became light. I could stay there forever. Everything was safe. Everything was right. Everything was, don't look behind you. The warning returned. This time I turned. Something moved beneath the trees. It stayed inside the shadows where the willows grew taller and stood closer together. I saw antlers. Then they disappeared. Something shifted behind another tree. A long tendon. A thin leg. Perhaps a hoof. I suddenly understood that the creature was the source of the laughter. The thought broke the trance. Branches were wrapped around my arms. Roots covered my legs. The trees were not dancing with me. They were holding me. I pulled away. The sky roared. The sound shook the entire field. The rings overhead began beating faster. The willows stiffened in fear. Their branches stopped moving. That gave me enough time to escape. I tore my arms free and ran. Tall grass struck my legs. I pushed through the field, moving away from the dense forest and the thing hiding inside it. The farther I ran, the weaker the laughter became. My mind started clearing. The sky flashed angrily above me. Its rings strobed like enormous eyes, opening and closing. I ran between the scattered trees. A branch struck my shoulder. Pain cut through me like a knife. I did not stop. The purple field began to fade. I woke covered in sweat. My heart hammered against my ribs. For several seconds, I did not know where I was. Then I saw my boxes, the window, and the ugly bedroom walls. It had been a dream, a terrible, vivid dream caused by cheap beer, stress, and a dirty mattress. I went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. The water was barely warm, but it helped clear my head. My entire body hurt. It felt as though I had been running all night instead of sleeping. That was what I got for using a free mattress. I stepped out of the shower and reached for my towel. When I looked into the mirror, fear went through me so suddenly that my knees almost gave way. There was a cut on my shoulder. A thin pink line crossed the exact place where the branch had struck me in the dream. For a moment, I saw the purple sky reflected behind me. I turned quickly. There was nothing there. I faced the mirror again. The cut remained. I blinked several times, hoping the injury would disappear. It did not. The skin across my shoulder was broken. I tried to explain it logically. Physical sensations from the real world often enter dreams. If someone touches your arm while you sleep, you may dream that something grabbed you. If a loud noise happens nearby, it may become part of the dream. There were also conditions connected to waking dreams and sleep paralysis. Perhaps I had scratched myself while asleep. The pain became part of the dream, so my mind created the branch. That had to be the answer. It had never happened to me before, but that did not mean it was impossible. I searched for explanations at work. By lunchtime, I had consumed 3 cups of coffee. None of them helped. By 3 in the afternoon, I could barely keep my eyes open. My body felt heavy, and my thoughts moved slowly. I had slept better on the wooden floor. When my shift ended, the whole city looked covered in fog. My eyelids felt as though someone had attached weights to them. A homeless man outside my building shook an empty food can in my direction. I walked past him. Sorry, I muttered. I did not have money to spare. At home, I fell onto the mattress. I did not lie down carefully. I simply dropped. I was asleep before my head touched the pillow. Then I opened my eyes beneath the purple sky. Fear hit me immediately. I was back. This time I had to remember that I was afraid. I did not look at the sky. I kept my eyes on the pale willow trees and their twisted branches. They were already moving. Their limbs curled like worms. My shoulders began following their rhythm without my permission. No, I had to run. I saw a path through the tall grass. It was the same path I had created the previous night. Every turn, every flattened patch, and every mark was exactly where I remembered leaving it. That was impossible. The trail should not exist. I had not really run through this place. It had only been a dream. Don't look behind you. The warning returned. How long had I been standing there? How long had the laughter been playing around me? I looked down. The ground was far beneath my feet. The trees had lifted me. Branches supported my arms and legs. They carried me upward in a slow, gentle motion. It almost felt comforting, like a hug, like a kiss. I floated toward the sky. Purple, pink, and soft blue light rolled above me. The heavens seemed ready to welcome me. We belong to the sky, I thought. Everything belongs to the sky. A branch twisted around my wrist. Pain flickered through my hand. I laughed. The sound came naturally. Another branch tightened around my ankle. I laughed again. Somewhere in the forest, the creature answered with a series of yips, squeals, and cackling cries. It was coming closer. The branches pulled my arms and legs apart. At first, the pain came in small waves. Then it sharpened. It felt like pieces of ice were being pushed through my muscles. I stopped laughing. The trees stretched me wider. Their branches became hard and rough against my skin. I heard footsteps behind me. Soft, quick impacts in the grass. The creature was approaching. I remembered the fear. The thing moved into view. It was difficult to understand what I was looking at. The first thing that reached me was the smell. Sweet, rot, dead flesh, meat left in the heat. The creature was tall enough to look into my eyes, even while the trees held me above the ground. Its body was bent forward, and large antlers rose from the top of its head. Or what I thought was its head. Its shape kept changing. A mouth opened beside an ear. Another appeared where an eye had been. The eye rolled backward, and teeth formed around it. They bit down, crushing the milky eyeball into wet paste. The creature laughed. Every mouth laughed differently. One produced a deep roar. Another made a childlike giggle. Others squealed, coughed, cried, or clicked their teeth. New mouths grew across its body. Some opened inside other mouths. Its skin peeled away in strips, revealing wet flesh beneath. I nearly vomited. A cloven hoof reached toward me. Behind the creature, I saw the purple sky. It seemed to purr with happiness. It wanted this. A feeling entered my mind. This is good. You belong here. For one dangerous moment, I almost believed it. Then I found myself again. I screamed. One human mouth against the creature's hundreds. The sound that came from me was so loud and desperate that I did not recognize it. The sky changed shape. Its rings tightened angrily. That was good. My scream frightened the trees. Their branches loosened. Even the creature stepped back. I pulled against the branch around my foot. One toe came free. Then my foot. Then my entire leg. The creature screamed. A hoof reached for me. I kicked it with my free leg. My foot struck something wet and cold. The impact staggered the beast. I tore one arm free, then the other. My body dropped upside down. One willow branch still held my ankle. From that angle, the creature looked even worse. The purple sky twisted overhead as though trying to decide what to do. I threw a thought toward it. I do not belong to you. The sky groaned inside my mind. You will see. I twisted my ankle. The branch slipped. I fell. My body struck the grass hard enough to drive the air from my lungs. I forced myself up and ran. I followed the old path through the field. Behind me, the creature charged. Its hooves struck the false ground in a fast, uneven rhythm. Every impact shook the earth. Its laughter had changed. It was no longer amused. It wailed with rage. I ran faster. I moved between the willows, avoiding the branches that reached for me. The creature came closer. I could smell it behind me. I did not turn around. The edges of my vision began to darken. The purple field narrowed into a tunnel. Then, everything vanished. I returned to my bedroom. The city skyline glowed outside the window. I rolled off the mattress and landed on the floor. My chest rose and fell rapidly. It took several minutes before I truly believed I was awake. I looked at my foot. A thick substance coated the skin where I had kicked the creature. The slime was oily and clear. It smelled strangely sweet. When I touched it, it was cold, not cool. Cold like something taken from a freezer. I sat there for hours. I tried to understand what had happened. Eventually, two truths became clear. The first was that none of it had been a dream. It was too real. The cut on my shoulder proved it. The slime on my foot proved it. Things from dreams do not leave wounds. You cannot carry something out of a dream and find it on your skin. The mattress was not simply a mattress. It was a doorway. Every time I slept on it, it carried me beneath that living purple sky. The second truth came slowly. When it did, every hair on the back of my neck stood upright. My body was exhausted. My eyes burned. Sooner or later, no matter how much coffee I drank or how frightened I became, My body would demand sleep. But the creature would be waiting. The willow trees would be waiting. The purple sky would be waiting. I understood that I could never lie on the mattress again. Then I understood something worse. It might not matter where I slept. I did not know whether the doorway was inside the mattress or whether the mattress had already opened something inside me. There was only one thing I knew for certain. I must not go back to sleep. Story 3. Tonight, beneath the shadow of a blood moon, I stood on top of the old wooden pole overlooking the village. The moon hung low above the mountains, large and red, its strange light cutting through the dark clouds. It made the rooftops look black and sharp. The trees surrounding the village appeared frozen beneath that crimson glow, their golden leaves moving softly in the night wind. I was breathing hard. Every muscle in my body burned. My hands were covered in cuts, and there was dried blood beneath my fingernails. My white clothes had been torn in several places. Smoke rose from the ground below, curling around the houses and drifting toward the hills. From that height, I could see almost the entire village. It was the place where I had been born, the place where I had grown up. But I could never bring myself to call it home. A home was supposed to protect you. A home was supposed to welcome you back when the world became cruel. A home was where people looked at you with love instead of fear. The village had never given me any of those things. When I was a child, I used to run alone through the tall grass at night. The grass would rise above my shoulders, brushing against my arms as I moved beneath the golden trees. I preferred the darkness. During the day, the villagers could see me clearly. They could point at me. They could whisper about the marks on my skin, the strange color of my eyes, and the heat that seemed to follow me wherever I went. At night, the shadows hid me. The moon never judged me. The trees never turned their backs. Sometimes I would run so far that the village lights disappeared behind me. I would keep going until I reached the black mountain where smoke rose from cracks in the earth. The mountain frightened everyone else. They said angry spirits lived beneath it. They warned their children not to go near it. They believed the fire inside the mountain was alive and hungry. But I was never afraid of it. I walked through places where the ground was hot enough to melt ordinary shoes. Flames moved around me, rising from the cracks like red hands. Smoke filled the air, thick and bitter. But it never made me cough. The fire never burned me. It wrapped itself around me like a blanket. That was why the villagers feared me. They said no normal child could walk through flames and survive. They said I had been cursed before birth. Some believed my mother had made an agreement with something living beneath the mountain. Others said I was not truly human. Whenever I passed through the village square, conversation stopped. Doors closed. Parents pulled their children away from me. I remembered their backs more clearly than their faces. I remembered people leaving the road when they saw me coming. I remembered children who had once played with me suddenly refusing to speak after their parents warned them about me. Even the old woman who sold bread refused to place a loaf directly into my hands. She would leave it on the table and step away before I approached. As a child, I often sat alone on the wooden swing near the edge of the village. The swing hung from the branch of a dead tree. The rope was rough, and the wooden seat was cracked. No one else used it because they believed anything I touched became cursed. I would sit there for hours, moving slowly back and forth while covering my ears. I did not want to hear the whispers. Monster, fire child, devil, beast, I pressed my hands tighter against my ears, but their voices always found a way inside. Sometimes the wind carried the words from open windows. Sometimes children shouted them from a safe distance before running away. Other times, I heard the words even when no one was near. I began to believe the entire world was whispering about me. The mountains whispered. The grass whispered. Even my own reflection seemed to move its lips whenever I looked into still water. They told me I had been raised by lightning and born from fire. Perhaps they were right. I never knew my parents. The village leader claimed they had died when I was still a baby, but he refused to explain how. I was raised in a small building near the fields, where people left food outside my door and walked away. No one held me when I cried. No one came when thunder shook the roof. I learned to sleep beside the fire because it was the only thing that made me feel safe. As I grew older, the fear around me became hatred. The villagers blamed me whenever something went wrong. If crops failed, they said my presence had poisoned the soil. If a child became sick, they said I had looked at them too long. If lightning struck a house, they believed I had called it down from the clouds. I tried to prove them wrong. I helped repair fences in the night so no one would see me. I carried water to dying plants. I guided lost animals back to their owners. It never mattered. They accepted the help, but continued calling me a monster. For years, I believed that if I did something great enough, they would finally see me differently. I imagined saving a child from the river or protecting the village from raiders. I imagined people cheering when I entered the square. I wanted them to apologize. More than anything, I wanted them to look at me without fear. Then, the beast came down from the mountain. It arrived during the blood moon. The earth shook before it appeared. Birds flew from the trees in dark clouds. Dogs began barking and tearing at their chains. The creature stepped out of the forest just before midnight. It was larger than any animal I had ever seen. Its body was covered in black scales, and smoke poured from its nostrils. It had long arms ending in claws that cut deep marks into the earth. Its eyes burned red. The villagers tried to fight it. Their arrows broke against its skin. Their spears melted when they came close to its mouth. The beast crushed houses beneath its feet and threw people through the air as though they weighed nothing. The same villagers who had spent years calling me a monster came running to my door. They begged me to save them. Some fell to their knees. Others promised money, land, and respect. The village leader, who had once ordered me to stay away from the square, gripped my arms and called me his child. I hated him for that. Still, I went to fight the creature. Perhaps a small part of me still wanted their love. Perhaps I wanted to prove that I was better than they believed. The battle lasted until the moon reached the center of the sky. The beast and I fought through the village and into the forest. Its claws tore open my shoulders. Its teeth cut into my side. I struck it with fire. It answered with smoke so dark that it blocked the moon. We crashed through trees and rolled down the mountain. The ground opened beneath us, revealing rivers of glowing rock. The creature tried to throw me into the lava. Instead, I pulled it down with me. The fire welcomed my body. The beast screamed. I held it beneath the flames until its scales cracked and its blood boiled. Its cries shook the mountain. At last, the creature stopped moving. For one moment, everything became still. The fire weakened. The smoke cleared. The looking glass inside my mind, the one filled with every cruel word and frightened face, finally shattered. The monster they had feared had saved them from a real monster. I climbed out of the mountain, carrying the creature's broken horn in my hand. The villagers waited for me on the hill. When they saw me, they began cheering. They shouted my name. Some cried with happiness. Others raised their hands toward me as though I were a god. "You destroyed the beast," they cried. "Its kind will never return. We will build a statue in your honor." For a brief moment, I thought I saw two small figures moving through the smoke near the dead creature. They were low to the ground and quick. One seemed to turn its head toward me before both disappeared between the rocks. I was too exhausted to care. All I could hear were the voices from the hill. They called me brave. They called me a hero. They told me I had always been one of them. The words I had wanted my entire life were finally being offered to me. But something inside me had changed. When the village leader moved forward to embrace me, I pushed him away. He stumbled backward and nearly fell. The cheering stopped. A woman reached toward me, but I knocked her hand aside. "You do not get to touch me now," I told them. Their smiles disappeared. I saw regret spreading across their faces. Once, that sight would have broken my heart. Instead, it brought me peace. Their guilt felt warmer than any embrace they could have offered. For years, I had begged silently for their love. Now that they were ready to give it, I wanted nothing from them. I had made a friend of distance. The empty space between us felt safer than closeness ever had. I wanted them to remember every door they had closed in my face. I wanted them to think about every cruel word whenever they looked at me. I wanted their guilt to remain with them until they died. That night, I left the villagers standing on the mountain. I climbed the old pole near the edge of the village and sat beneath the blood moon. The ground below was quiet. Small fires burned among the damaged houses. Villagers moved through the streets, helping the injured and searching for those who were missing. No one came near me. For the first time, I had their respect. For the first time, they were afraid to disturb me. I closed my eyes. The night air cooled the blood on my skin. My body felt heavier with every breath. I fell asleep beneath the red moon, never knowing what would be waiting when I opened my eyes again. While I slept, screams spread through the night. They began far away, so faint they sounded like animals crying in the forest. Then they moved closer. Doors broke. Roofs collapsed. People shouted for help. I dreamed of the village burning. I dreamed of two small creatures crawling through the smoke. Their red eyes opened in the darkness, and their mouths stretched wider than any animal's mouth should. I tried to wake up. Something held me down. In the dream, warm liquid poured over my body. When I finally opened my eyes, the screaming had stopped. The world was unnaturally silent. I was no longer sitting on the pole. I lay on the ground beneath a sky filled with black clouds. The blood moon had disappeared. For several moments, I did not understand what had happened. Then, I noticed the weight of my clothes. My white clothing was soaked in blood. It covered my chest, arms, and legs. It had been smeared across my face and was dripping from my hair. The blood was fresh. It was still warm. Its smell filled my nose and mouth. The thick, metallic stench was so strong that I gagged. I pushed myself upright. My hand slipped against the wet ground. There was blood everywhere. It formed dark pools around me and ran between my fingers. I searched my body for wounds, but I could not find any. The blood did not belong to me. "Hello?" I called. My voice echoed through the emptiness. There was no answer. The smell became unbearable. I needed water before the blood dried against my skin. I began walking. At first, I believed the village was hidden behind the smoke. But there were no houses, no trees, no mountains. As far as I could see, there was only sand. The entire village had disappeared. The fields were gone. The roads had vanished. Even the old pole was nowhere in sight. A flat desert stretched in every direction. I walked for what felt like hours. The blood dried in my clothes, making them stiff and heavy. Sand stuck to my face and hair. My throat began to ache. I searched for a stream, a well, or even a small pool left by rain. There was nothing. The sun rose, turning the sky white with heat. My lips cracked. My tongue felt swollen. Each breath scraped the inside of my throat. I continued walking because stopping felt like death. Still, the desert never changed. There were no footprints except mine. No birds crossed the sky. No insects moved beneath the sand. Only the wind followed me. It blew across the empty land with a hollow sound, almost like someone breathing through a broken flute. My knees finally gave way. I collapsed onto the burning ground. The sand scorched my palms, but I no longer had the strength to move. I lay there gasping, my throat raw from thirst. That was when I saw the man. He appeared far in the distance. At first, I believed he was a trick of the heat. His body moved like a shadow through the bright air. As he came closer, I saw that his entire body was painted blue. His face, arms, chest, and legs were covered in deep blue paint. He wore no shirt, and a necklace of small mirrors hung around his neck. He stopped several steps away. Then, he began laughing. He clapped his hands and cheered as though he had been waiting for me to fall. "Water," I whispered. The blue man only laughed harder. I dragged myself toward him. Every movement sent pain through my arms. "Please," I begged, "help me." Before I could reach him, the wind became stronger. Sand rose from the ground. Within seconds, a violent storm surrounded us. The blue man disappeared behind a wall of dust. I covered my face, but the sand forced its way through my fingers. It filled my nose and mouth. I tried to call out. The storm swallowed my voice. Then, the world went dark. When I opened my eyes again, night had returned. For a moment, I believed I had become blind. Total darkness surrounded me. Then a small light appeared in the distance. It flickered softly. Another light joined it. Then another. Soon, dozens of flames moved toward me. A crowd of people walked across the desert carrying torches. They wore long robes the color of fresh blood. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods. Between them, they carried a tall mirror. Their laughter reached me before they did. It was wild and unnatural, rising and falling like the cries of hungry animals. I pushed myself to my feet. My legs shook beneath me. The people in red formed a circle around me. The mirror remained hidden beneath a dark cloth. "Help me," I said. "I'm lost." My voice sounded weak and dry. My village was here. It used to be right here. The crowd became silent. The blue-painted man stepped from between them. He still wore the necklace of mirrors. "Your village?" he asked. His smile widened. "Didn't you say it was never your home?" The people laughed again. The sound cut through me. "Who are you?" I demanded. The blue man tilted his head. "We are here to break your reflection." The laughter stopped at once. Every hooded face turned toward me. I tried to run. My legs failed after only a few steps, and I fell to the ground. The red-robed people moved quickly. They placed the mirror in front of me and tore away the cloth. At first, I saw only darkness inside the glass. Then, the surface moved like water. An image appeared. I saw myself sleeping beneath the blood moon. The village was quiet below me. Then, two small shapes entered from the forest. They were the figures I had seen moving through the smoke after killing the beast. The creature had not been alone. It had children. They were smaller than their parent, but faster. Their bodies were covered in thin black scales. Smoke spilled from their mouths as they crawled on long arms. One climbed onto a rooftop. The other moved between the houses. The first villager to see them screamed. The creatures attacked. They tore through doors and pulled people into the streets. Fire poured from their mouths, spreading from house to house. The villagers tried to fight. They fired arrows and threw spears, just as they had against the larger beast. Nothing worked. They called my name. I heard them shouting for me from below the pole. "Help us. Please, save the children." I remained asleep. The mirror showed the village leader climbing the pole to reach me. Before he made it halfway, one of the creatures pulled him down. He disappeared beneath its claws. The villagers ran toward the mountain. The second creature blocked their path. Together, the beasts killed everyone. When there was no one left alive, they began destroying the village itself. They tore apart the houses. They burned the fields. They crushed the well and split the roads. Then they climbed onto the mountain and screamed toward the sky. The earth shook. Sand rose from beneath the village, swallowing everything. The buildings disappeared first. Then the trees. Then the bodies. By morning, nothing remained except the desert. The final image showed the two creatures standing over me. They were covered in blood. One leaned close and sniffed my face. The other poured blood across my body. They did not kill me. They left me there beneath the changing world. The vision faded. Only my own reflection remained in the mirror. My face looked pale beneath the dried blood. The blue man stood behind me. "You could have saved them," he said. His voice no longer sounded amused. "Instead, you chose revenge." "I didn't know," I whispered. "You wanted them to suffer. I wanted them to regret what they did." They did. His reflection leaned closer to mine. They regretted it while their children were burning. I turned away from the mirror. "Stop. Every death that followed belongs partly to you." "That isn't true. You saw the creatures in the smoke." I was tired. "You chose not to care." "I killed the beast. I cried. I saved them once. And when they needed you again, you allowed your hatred to close your eyes." Tears formed in my eyes. "It is true that I might have saved them," I said. "But I never imagined it would end this way." The blue man stepped backward into the shadows between the torches. No one ever imagines the final cost of revenge. The people in red lowered their heads. "You were consumed by your own dark reflection," the blue man whispered. The mirror began to crack. Thin lines spread across my reflected face. And power does not create the darkness inside a person. The cracks deepened. It only reveals what was already waiting there. Lightning tore across the sky. The flash was so bright that every person around me became a black shape. Thunder followed, shaking the desert. Then the sky began to bleed sand. It did not fall like dust. It fell like heavy red rain. Each grain struck my skin like a blade. I raised my arms to protect my face, but the sand cut through my clothes. It filled my eyes and scraped beneath my eyelids. I screamed. The storm forced sand into my mouth. I began choking. The people in red stood silently around me. Their robes moved in the wind, but none of them stepped forward. "Help me," I cried. My voice disappeared beneath the storm. The blue man watched from behind the flames. The mirror shattered. Thousands of pieces fell onto the sand, each one showing a different part of my face. The storm grew stronger. Sand gathered around my feet, then my ankles. I tried to pull myself free, but the ground tightened around me. The desert rose to my knees. I reached toward the crowd. No one moved. The sand climbing my body was not ordinary sand. It smelled of smoke, blood, and burned wood. I saw pieces of the village inside it. A broken child's toy struck my arm. A piece of the old swing brushed against my hand. Fragments of roof tiles, shattered dishes, burned clothing, and human bones moved through the storm. This was not merely the desert. It was the dust of my destroyed home. The place I had refused to call home was burying me. The sand reached my waist. I tried to use fire, but no flames came. For the first time in my life, the heat inside me was gone. I called to the lightning. The sky answered only with thunder. The red-robed figures watched in silence. The blue man's face showed no hatred and no pleasure, only judgment. The sand rose to my chest. Each breath became more difficult. I thought of the village as it had once been. The golden trees, the tall grass, the old wooden swing. I remembered the backs of the people who had rejected me. Then I remembered their faces on the mountain after I saved them. For the first time, I understood the fear in their eyes. It had not only been fear of me. Some of it had been shame. Some of it had been regret. Perhaps they had wanted to change. Perhaps I had pushed them away before they had the chance. The sand reached my neck. I cried out one final time. "I'm sorry." The words sounded small against the storm. I did not know whether I was speaking to the dead villagers, to the children, or to the frightened child I had once been. The blue man raised one hand. For a moment, I believed he might save me. Instead, he covered his eyes. The sand reached my mouth. I tried to hold my breath. It filled my nose. It pressed against my ears and buried the broken pieces of the mirror around me. My lungs burned. The final thing I saw was the blood moon appearing through the clouds. Its red light touched the desert. Then the ground closed over my head. The dust of the village filled my lungs, silencing every scream. I had spent my entire life refusing to belong to that place. In the end, it became the only place that would keep me forever. Story 4. Russell was starting to lose patience with the idiot in his rearview mirror. The car behind him had been following far too closely for several miles, and if that was not annoying enough, the driver had also left his high beams on. The bright lights filled Russell's mirrors and reflected across the polished interior of his Cybertruck, making it difficult to concentrate on the road ahead. He adjusted the rearview mirror, but the light still found his eyes. "Unbelievable," he muttered. The other vehicle was a small Korean sedan, the kind of cheap little car Russell would never have been caught driving. It looked old, low to the ground, and completely ordinary. Russell could not understand why anyone would choose something like that when better options existed. Of course, Russell would not have needed to deal with the bright reflection at all if he had been allowed to remove the mirror. The Cybertruck already had live cameras that offered a much clearer view of everything behind him. In his opinion, the old piece of reflective glass was outdated and useless. But the people on the Transportation Safety Board apparently believed they knew better. They made rules for everyone, even when people like Russell understood technology and vehicles far better than they did. If he had removed the mirror and received a ticket, he would probably have been forced to stand in front of some traffic court judge who had never driven anything more advanced than a family minivan. Russell did not feel like wasting his time explaining common sense to people like that. He looked into the mirror again. The car was still there, too close. Its high beams were still burning into his eyes. He considered speeding up, but he was already moving slightly above the limit. Besides, he did not want to give the driver the satisfaction of thinking he had been intimidated. The man behind him could wait. Other than the annoying driver, the evening had gone well. Taylor had looked almost exactly like her profile picture, which Russell considered a small miracle. He had been using dating apps for long enough to know that many women were dishonest about their appearance. They used old photographs, strange angles, makeup, and filters to hide what they really looked like. Taylor had not done that. She was attractive, clean, well-dressed, and feminine. She did not have pink hair, facial piercings, or tattoos covering her arms. Finding someone like her on the dating apps had taken months of effort. Russell had learned to be careful. His profile clearly said that he was not interested in politics, but that had not stopped some of his matches from spending entire dates complaining about whatever social issue was popular that week. They always claimed they did not want to discuss politics, then somehow turned every conversation into a speech about unfairness, privilege, or something they had seen on social media. Russell had tried being polite at first. He had even enjoyed playing devil's advocate. In his mind, it was important for people to hear different opinions. He believed he was helping them by challenging their ideas. The problem was that most of those women did not know how to have a real debate. They became emotional. They called him offensive. They refused to listen when he explained why they were wrong. After a few experiences like that, Russell decided he was wasting his time. He did not want to build a future with a woman who believed he should feel guilty for being white, male, or capable of thinking for himself. He had read enough posts from men on dating forums to know he was not the only one who felt this way. The car behind him moved even closer. Russell slowed down. He dropped his speed to 10 miles below the limit, hoping the driver would become frustrated and pass him. The car did not pass. It stayed directly behind him. The high beams remained on. A familiar warmth began creeping up the back of Russell's neck. It moved toward his ears, slowly spreading through his head. He knew that feeling. It often came when someone was disrespecting him, ignoring him, or acting as if his time did not matter. Russell took a breath and shook his head. Some people never learn, he said quietly. He tried to focus on Taylor instead. She had seemed interested in seeing him again. Why would she not be? During dinner, she kept talking about how difficult it had become to meet a nice man. Russell had smiled because he knew she had finally found one. He had opened the restaurant door for her. He had pulled out her chair. He had paid the entire bill. He had kept the conversation moving and made several jokes that she laughed at. He had been charming, generous, and respectful all evening. There had been a small problem with the waiter, but Russell did not think it should count against him. He had ordered his steak medium rare. Everyone knew what medium rare meant. The center should be warm and red, with the meat slightly firm but still tender. There was no room for confusion. The steak the waiter brought was clearly undercooked. When Russell pointed this out, the waiter had tried to explain that the steak was prepared correctly. That was the real problem. Instead of simply apologizing and fixing the mistake, the waiter argued with him in front of Taylor. Russell could not allow that. The customer was supposed to be right. That was how the service industry worked. People were paid to make the customer happy, not challenge him. Russell had asked to speak to the manager. When the waiter continued explaining the temperature of the steak, Russell threatened to remove the tip. He had only been half serious. Mostly, he was trying to regain control of the situation before the heat inside his head became too strong. The waiter looked offended. People could not take a joke anymore. Taylor had quietly apologized to the waiter as he left the table, which Russell thought was unnecessary. She had also seemed embarrassed for the rest of the meal, but Russell believed that would pass. Women were naturally attracted to confidence and dominance. Russell had read enough about human biology to understand that. Taylor might have been taught to say she wanted kindness and emotional sensitivity, but her instincts would eventually lead her toward a strong man. A man like Russell, not a weak, soft waiter who apologized for everything. Russell looked into the mirror again. The car behind him flashed its headlights. Then the driver honked. Russell's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "What the hell is your problem?" The horn sounded again. The warmth at the back of his neck suddenly became much stronger. It pushed behind his eyes and spread through his skull. Russell punched the steering wheel. Once, twice, 3 times. "Go round, idiot." The other car remained behind him. Russell forced himself to breathe. He did not want to lose control. Not yet. He decided to leave the freeway and take the back roads toward his house. Once he turned off, the annoying driver would continue straight, and the problem would be over. He moved into the exit lane. The little sedan followed him. Russell frowned. Maybe the driver lived in the same area. It was possible. Still, something about it bothered him. He tried thinking about the end of his date instead. Ordinarily, Russell would have been disappointed to spend $300 on dinner and receive only a quick kiss at the end of the evening. It was not a very good return on his investment. However, Taylor seemed worth the wait. She met almost every requirement he had for a serious relationship. She cared about family, but did not have children of her own. She believed in traditional values. She attended church and spent some of her free time helping run a food pantry. Russell did not understand why she wanted to waste her weekends handing food to people who had failed to become productive members of society, but he supposed everyone needed a hobby. Taylor also worked in an office. She had explained her job during dinner, but Russell had not paid close attention. It involved management, planning, or administration. He could not remember. It probably would not matter if their relationship became serious. Russell doubted she would miss her career once they married and had children. She would likely be happier taking care of the house while he focused on providing for the family. He had not told her that yet. There would be time. She was also extremely attractive. They looked good together. Russell had noticed people glancing at them in the restaurant, and he enjoyed imagining what they were thinking. Even though the kiss at the end of the night had only been a quick touch of the lips, Russell was certain Taylor had been interested. She had pulled away quickly, but that was probably because she wanted to appear respectable. It would not take much longer for all the nice guy effort to pay off. The road became darker as Russell drove farther from the freeway. Streetlights disappeared. Trees stood close to both sides of the narrow road, their branches forming black shapes against the night sky. Russell checked the mirror. The car was still following him. Its headlights remained painfully bright. "That's it," Russell whispered. He turned onto another road. The sedan followed. He took a second turn. The car remained behind him. There was no longer any doubt in Russell's mind. The driver was following him on purpose. Maybe the man wanted to steal the Cybertruck. Russell had seen videos about people being followed home so criminals could break into their houses. Expensive vehicles made people targets. It was possible the driver had noticed Russell leaving the restaurant and decided he looked wealthy. Or maybe it was connected to Taylor. Perhaps the driver was an ex-boyfriend. Maybe she had secretly told someone where she was going. Russell's anger grew hotter. He did not like being played with. The car flashed its lights again. Russell's jaw clenched so tightly that his teeth began to ache. The heat behind his eyes was pounding now. It had grown stronger than he had ever felt before. He could almost imagine flames moving through his veins. "Fine," he said. "You want to do this?" He slammed on the brakes. The Cybertruck slowed violently. Russell pulled the steering wheel hard to the left. The heavy vehicle skidded sideways across the road and stopped at an angle, blocking both lanes. The sedan stopped several yards behind him. Its headlights shone directly at the Cybertruck. Russell opened his door. Cold night air struck his face, but it did nothing to cool the fire growing inside him. He climbed out and stormed toward the smaller car. The road was completely empty. No houses, no streetlights, no other vehicles. Only trees, darkness, and the bright headlights of the sedan. Russell approached the driver's side door and struck the window with his fist. "Roll it down." There was no response. The windows were heavily tinted. Russell could not see the driver. He pounded harder. "Open the window." Nothing moved inside. Of course the windows were tinted. That proved what kind of person he was dealing with. Probably some criminal or gang member who thought he could intimidate people on an empty road. Not tonight. Russell hit the glass again. "You picked the wrong person." His heart was racing. The anger inside him continued growing, larger and hotter with every strike. He had experienced moments of rage before. He had shouted at customer service employees. He had punched holes in walls. He had broken a television remote during a football game. He had once thrown a chair after losing an argument online. But this was different. This anger did not feel like something he needed to control. It felt powerful. It felt pure. For the first time in his life, Russell stopped fighting it. He allowed the rage to take over completely. The heat rushed through his brain like an explosion. His vision became red at the edges. His arms felt stronger. His thoughts became simple and clear. He was right. The other driver was wrong. Russell had been disrespected, and disrespect deserved punishment. His anger was not ugly. It was righteous. He raised both fists and hammered the window again and again. Then he noticed a glow. At first, it appeared as a small orange light in the dark glass. Russell stopped. The glow became brighter. Orange turned to yellow. Yellow became white. The light grew larger, spreading across the window. Even through his rage, Russell understood that it was a reflection. Something behind him was burning. He turned his head slightly. The smell reached him first. Burning hair, burning fabric, burning flesh. Then he understood. His head was on fire. Flames rose from his hair and spread across his face. They poured over his shoulders and ran down his chest. Russell screamed. He slapped at his head, but the fire only grew. Within seconds, flames covered his entire body. His shirt blackened and curled against his skin. His jacket caught fire. The material melted and stuck to him. A thick cloud of black smoke rose into the air. The smell was unbearable. Russell stumbled backward. He fell onto the road and rolled across the asphalt, trying to smother the flames. It did not work. The fire did not behave like normal fire. It did not weaken. It did not spread from one object to another. It remained attached to him, burning hotter every second. Russell tore at his clothes. Pieces of flaming fabric came away in his hands, but the skin underneath was burning too. He screamed until his throat became raw. Through the smoke, he looked toward the sedan. It was gone. The road behind him was empty. There were no headlights, no tire marks, no sound of an engine leaving. In the place where the car had stood, there was now a horse. The animal was black, not simply dark brown or black like an ordinary horse. Its body seemed to swallow the weak light around it. It looked like a hole cut into the night, somehow darker than the moonless sky. Its eyes burned with a deep red glow. The horse pulled back its lips, revealing large, wet teeth. It snorted, stamped its hooves against the road, and threw its head from side to side. Black foam dripped from its mouth. A rider sat on its back. The figure wore a long black cloak that covered its entire body. The hood was pulled forward, hiding the face inside. The horse moved violently beneath the rider, but the figure remained perfectly still. It did not pull the reins. It did not speak. It seemed completely in control, as though the animal's rage belonged to it. Russell continued rolling on the ground. "Help me." His voice cracked. "Please." The figure watched him burn. Russell crawled toward the Cybertruck. Maybe there was water inside. Maybe he could reach the emergency kit. Maybe he could call someone. His hands pressed against the road, leaving strips of burned skin behind. The heat grew more intense. His hair was gone. The skin on his face tightened and split. Blisters rose across his arms and chest, swelling before bursting. The rider slowly raised one arm. A long staff appeared in its hand. It had not been there before. One moment, the bony hand was empty. The next, its fingers were wrapped around a black wooden pole. The staff was taller than the rider. At its upper end, a small flame appeared. The flame stretched outward. It curved. Within seconds, it formed a long blade made entirely of fire. Russell stared at it. The shape reminded him of something. A weapon carried by death in old paintings. A scythe. "No," Russell whispered. The rider moved closer. The horse's hooves struck the road with heavy, slow impacts. Russell raised one arm. "Wait." The figure did not stop. "I didn't do anything." His voice was weak. "I'm a good person." The horse came closer. Russell could feel the heat of the blade even through the fire already covering him. "I'm a nice guy." The rider lifted the scythe. Russell attempted to stand, but his legs would not support him. The muscles had begun to tighten and burn beneath his skin. He fell again. "Please." He raised both arms in front of his chest. The weapon came down. The fiery blade passed through his arms and entered his chest. There was no resistance. It cut through bone and muscle as though his body were made of smoke. The blade stopped deep inside him. For one silent second, Russell felt nothing. Then the fire inside his body exploded. The flames around him swelled. Their temperature rose beyond anything the human body was capable of surviving. His skin blistered. The blisters burst. The flesh beneath began to melt. Russell screamed, but the sound became a rough hiss as the air left his damaged lungs. He could feel every part of himself being destroyed. His muscles softened and separated. Fat liquefied beneath his skin. His eyes boiled inside their sockets. His teeth cracked from the heat. The tissue of his body turned to black liquid, then hardened into flakes of ash. Still, he remained conscious. That was the worst part. He felt everything. The rider held the blade inside his chest while Russell burned. Images passed through his mind. The waiter at the restaurant, standing beside the table while Russell threatened his tip. Taylor's uncomfortable expression. The women who had ended dates early. A customer service worker he had reduced to tears. His former girlfriend locking herself in the bathroom while he shouted outside. The hole he had punched through the bedroom door. The apologies he had demanded but never offered. The times he had called his anger honesty. The times he had called cruelty strength. The times he had believed kindness was something he could purchase and later collect payment for. The fire continued consuming him. His body collapsed inward. There was less and less left to burn. The flames slowly became smaller as they ran out of flesh, clothing, and bone. The pain began to fade. Russell's consciousness slipped away from the road. The horse stood quietly now. The rider pulled the blade from what remained of Russell's chest. Ash lifted into the air. The Cybertruck remained sideways across the road, its cameras recording nothing but darkness. Russell could no longer feel his arms or legs. He could no longer hear the horse. His final thoughts did not include Taylor. They did not include the waiter. They did not include regret. Russell did not wonder whether he had been cruel. He did not question whether his anger had controlled him. He did not consider that the world might not have been the problem. As darkness closed around him, he thought only about how unfair everything had been. He had paid for dinner. He had opened doors. He had followed the rules when the rules made sense to him. He had tried to be strong. He had tried to be honest. And this was how the world rewarded him. His last thought came with the same bitter certainty that had guided him through his entire life. Why did bad things always happen to nice guys? Story 5. The world was damp stone, sour air, and shattered ceramic tile. Almost every piece of tile had been broken. The remaining fragments were covered in spreading patterns of dried blood, tissue, and scabbed pieces of what had once been living human flesh. The halls were poorly lit, and the air was thick with the smell of human waste, infection, and rotting death. The smell itself seemed alive. It was the smell of suffering. The world had always suffered. But lately, it had become much worse. The walls, mortar, and rusted bars were stained with diseased feces and angry streams of urine. The entire building seemed like one enormous open wound, infected and rotting from the inside. Willowbrook had become a temple built for pain. A monument to the sorceress. She was the woman who lived beyond the distant mountains, the mouth of those great dark peaks. Though she remained far away, her power brought her close. Distance meant nothing to her. Time meant nothing. Only flesh mattered. Only blood. Only the living warmth spilled by her imprisoned children, offered to her like worship. In the end, she had come to them. Before the burning, before Cropsey, now Cropsey was the greatest of all her Willowbrook children. The girl did her best to hide from him and from the few others who remained alive inside the ruined building. She pressed herself deeper into the dark corner she had chosen as her latest hiding place. Her heart pounded painfully inside her thin chest. She tried to become smaller. She tried to disappear into the filthy walls, but she could hear something moving through the long, dark halls. Voices, footsteps, new people had entered Willowbrook. She wanted desperately to escape the building. She dreamed of running outside and never looking back. But her mind pulled away in terror whenever she imagined meeting strangers. Willowbrook had once been called a school. It had taught her many lessons. It taught her what men did to one another when nobody stopped them. It taught her what men enjoyed doing to helpless people. It taught her what could happen when a girl was alone and weak enough to be easily controlled. The distant voices faded. Then they rose again in quiet whispers. She heard careful footsteps. They did not sound like the mindless wandering of the remaining patients. These footsteps were controlled. Quiet, hunting steps. Cold terror told her she could no longer stay where she was. She pushed herself upright. Her legs shook beneath her. They were painfully thin from years of hunger and sickness. Every movement felt like forcing brittle sticks to support her body. She began to move down the dark corridor. Walking hurt because fear had tightened every muscle in her body. It also hurt because she was covered in swollen purple sores. They spread across her legs, arms, stomach, back, and face in dense clusters. Several tore open as she moved, sending sharp lines of pain through her skin. Warm fluid ran down her legs. She tried not to look at the wounds. She used to examine them constantly. She would scratch them, squeeze them, or tear them open with her fingernails. She no longer did that. Sometimes, when she pinched one of the sores, she saw an eye inside. A tiny eye would move within the pus, staring up at her from beneath the infected skin. Other sores opened by themselves. When that happened, a small bald head sometimes pushed through the wound. The creature was no larger than a garden gnome. Its skin was green and pale, like dead flesh covered in spoiled milk. It would poke its little fairy-like head from her body and look around, curious to see what she was doing. She hated those small faces. She hated their eyes. She tried to ignore them. Sometimes she wondered whether the creatures living in her sores could see things in the darkness that she could not. But she would never ask them. Never. The voices became louder. So did her fear. She did not know where to go. Maybe they are all dead, Florin whispered. Griffin nodded. It was a reasonable thought. The building certainly smelled as though everyone inside had died. The air was so thick with decay and filth that he could almost believe nothing living remained. Almost, experience told him otherwise. They were not alone. Someone else moved through the dark building. Something had claimed Willowbrook as its home. Something terrible. Griffin could feel it watching them. This place is diseased, he said quietly. There is sickness in the air. You can taste it. Florin looked around nervously. The boy was young, but he had already seen enough terrible things to understand fear. His eyes moved constantly between the open doorways and the shadows at the end of the hall. Something awful happened here, Griffin continued. Many awful things, I suspect. The building is silent, but it almost feels as if the walls remember everything they have witnessed. Florin's face tightened. Griffin realized his words were making the boy more frightened. We will be careful, he added. We need to search quickly. If we cannot find another exit, we will return to the front and try to move around the outside of the building. Florin nodded. Together, they continued searching. They needed supplies. Food, medicine, tools, weapons, anything useful. They also needed to know whether anyone still lived inside. Cropsey watched them from the darkness. He followed their slow progress through the building, never allowing them to see him. In his black-gloved hands, he held a large pair of garden shears. He slowly pulled the long silver blades apart. Then he brought them together. Snip. The sound was sharp and satisfying. He opened them again, slowly, almost lovingly. Then he closed them. Snip. The noise pleased something soft and damaged inside his skull. It also pleased the ruined flesh hanging between his legs. The sound had a tongue. It whispered to him. It promised the feeling of metal passing through skin and bone. That desire was his prison. That hunger. This building. The mountain. Even now, Cropsey could hear the sorceress singing to him from far away. Her voice showed him the dark mountain where she ruled from a black throne. She filled his dreams with slaughter. She filled his empty mind with wonder. She had always been the true purpose of Willowbrook. She was the blessing for which they had all been waiting.